So, this spooky story was written by a user on Reddit. I don't really like editing other people's videos, but for some reason I really felt compelled to try and do this one. Let's see if it was worth it. First of all, we have these super low hums and winds and distant thunderclaps. Then we layer in a subtle heartbeat, which will get faster and more intense as the story progresses. Then we have our narrator, Daniel. He has this very calm yet eerie tone of voice, which I think fits the character well. I find it funny that he chose to wear a blue shirt while recording this. I feel like that's not really what I expected him to wear, but it works. Now the setting is obviously an important part of this story. It takes place at Daniel's grandmother's abandoned house up on Widow's Hill in Maine. Already I'm getting a little bit scared just thinking about it. Now before Daniel goes over there, we have a montage of shots of the creepy old house. The swinging gate, the overgrown weeds, the boarded up windows, the front door, which looks like it hasn't been opened in years. And finally, the creepy second floor window where the lady likes to stand. The next scene takes place inside of the house. So we have a lot of tight close-ups of the creaky floors, the wet, rotting wood, and also some stuff that's slightly out of frame. Like sometimes you can see Daniel's shoes or his legs, and we can hear the floorboards creaking under his weight. So this immediately establishes that the house is basically falling apart. It's like Daniel's constantly reminded of how dilapidated the place is. And it also makes us, as the audience, uncomfortable. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't squirming in my seat a little bit. Now, later on in the story, we get to hear about the house's reputation for being cursed. And apparently there are rumors that whoever owns the house gets cursed. And so far, the only way to avoid that curse is to kill the lady in the window. Daniel doesn't really believe any of that, of course. He thinks it's just a bunch of superstitious nonsense. But man, the whole story kinda starts to make you wonder. Now, one of the best parts about this story is the pacing. There's a ton of suspense. The story is very slow-paced. We spend a lot of time simply listening to Daniel describe all of the noises he hears throughout the house. And those sounds are super effective. First, we start to hear random creaks and groans. And then eventually we hear things like buzzing, humming, whispers, and footsteps. And all of these sounds slowly build up, like they're getting louder and more frequent and more intense. And it creates this sense of dread and anticipation, like something bad is about to happen. And then when something does happen, it's even scarier, because we've been building up for so long. One of the most memorable moments of the story is when Daniel first discovers the journal in the attic. He finds this old wooden chest with brass hinges and an iron lock. It looks ancient. And then, when he finally opens it, the camera pans across all of the dusty items inside. There's old faded clothes, a ring with a blood-red stone, a cracked porcelain doll, and a small leather-bound journal. And then we have a close-up of the journal with a keyhole in the center. And then we finally hear the pages turning, and we get to read what's written inside. And it's just this mysterious rambling about the lady in the window. And then, later in the story, we hear from another entry and it says, "She's watching me from the window again tonight. I can feel her eyes boring into my skull. I haven't slept in days. I don't think I can take much more of this. Whatever curse is upon this house, I refuse to be a part of it." And then the next page is ripped out. One thing that I find funny about this story is that at first it seems like Daniel is this logical, rational guy who doesn't believe in the supernatural. And he thinks that all of these crazy events have some kind of rational explanation. But as the story goes on, he gets more and more desperate and unhinged. For example, when he sees the lady in the window for the first time, he tries to convince himself that she's actually just a person. You know, she's probably just a poor homeless woman. Or she could be a tramp who's just looking for somewhere to stay warm. But it's clear that neither of those explanations make sense. Another funny detail is when Daniel checks the basement window to see if the lady is still outside, and he says, "It was clean, no footprints, no broken glass, only the boards I had nailed up were gone." And I love this shot because the window is completely covered in cobwebs. And then we zoom out to show us that Daniel is kneeling in a pile of dirt and wood shavings. It's like he's surrounded by all this gross stuff, and it reinforces the feeling that he's trapped in this house. Then there's the scene where Daniel goes downstairs in the middle of the night, and he's holding his flashlight, and it's making this cool beam of light cutting through the darkness. And it's like a spotlight, you know, like the stage lights are on him. And then suddenly the battery dies and he drops the flashlight. And it's just this quick cut to black. But you can hear him drop it, and then we hear these creepy footsteps coming closer and closer and closer. And then we hear this evil laugh. And then the screen is just filled with static. Now when Daniel finally does come face to face with the lady in the window, she doesn't seem threatening at first. She's just standing there soaking wet, staring at him. And then she smiles and she says, "Hello." And this moment is made scarier by the fact that the camera isn't showing us the lady. It's showing us Daniel's perspective. All we see is a silhouette and then a white figure behind her. And then we hear her speak, and her voice is described as chillingly calm and unnatural. And it's like she knows something that he doesn't know. She says, "Welcome home, Daniel. We've been waiting." And the fact that she says, "we" suggests that she's not the only one who's been waiting. And then finally, the story ends with Daniel narrating what happens after that moment. He tells us that he doesn't know how long he's been in the house, but every night he hears someone walking up the stairs and screaming and crying and saying, "I don't believe in ghost stories." And then there's this sudden loud bang on the door, and then the video ends. Overall, I think this story is great. It's definitely one of the better Reddit horror stories I've read in a while. The writing is really strong. It's super immersive. It's scary. It's suspenseful. And it keeps you guessing. And I think that my voice acting was decent too. So yeah, I definitely recommend checking out the original post if you haven't already.